Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Fix Stories. We are here with the lovely Sam. She is a writer that has graciously found us on TikTok, and we just struck up a friendship over at the Discord that she created. And we are here with her today to talk about her story, Inkbound. And I'm very excited. Sam, would you like to introduce yourself?
So my name's Samantha. I go by SLZden on TikTok, and I'm currently writing my second book, Inkbound. It's a story about a ghostwriter who gets kidnapped and taken into her unfinished story, and she has to complete that story before it finishes her. The only catch is that all the characters within her story are not going by the script, and they know who she is.
So I'm really excited because we all read, here at OBA, we all read the first 10K words, 12K words, and then we're going to get the rest of the synopsis from Sam, and we're going to talk about it. And I will also introduce Jared, who is our usual host, so I'm a little out of my element here. um, and then our other editor and writer at OBA here is Charles.
Hello.
Hello. We are all about pushing people out of their comfort zone here, so I am
I don't like it.
living. All right. Well, all of that's to say, thank you for being here, Sam. Thank you for sharing this story with us. I think me and Jaylon both had talked about it yesterday. How Jaylon specifically has been very, 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 very excited about your story and us to talk about it. So we're gonna get into that. But Jaylon, if you don't mind, I can take over for you.
Yes, please do.
So the first question I would ask you before we jump into your actual story is why did you decide to write this story? Why was this the story that had to be written?
Okay, so it's kind of a funny story because it wasn't supposed to be a story. Um, I have another book that I wrote, my debut, that I'm currently querying right now. So it's in the querying trenches. As I was editing that story, which it was my first story, so I went through like 14 drafts. And in the process, I was getting really frustrated. I didn't know what I was doing. I kept thinking like, oh, I'm not doing this right. So on the side, I would make fun of that story. And somehow a story grew from it. And I just kind of went with it. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this would be so cool if I did this. And then I was like, other writers are out here struggling too. And a lot of us don't have writing degrees. You know, we're just kind of winging this. And, you know, I was like, this could be a story for writers. So that's kind of like what happened. And like I said, it really wasn't supposed to be a story. So it's kind of like a satire of my debut.
Gotcha.
I love that. And it's very true. I would say even writers with English degrees are out here winging it because the creative lifestyle is, it's not one that is easily a journey walked for sure.
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah, I definitely agree. The whole literary path is it's like I don't know. It's like walking blindfolded into the Temple of Doom. It's you just really know nothing most of the time, and then you fail upwards hopefully. And so it's cool. It's cool that you were able to find some inspiration in your journey, and then share that with other people because that's the one thing that I think that really stood out to me about the book was that the protagonist of this story is highly, highly, highly relatable, especially if you are a writer. If you're a writer, this is a character that it's like I was saying I think I saw when I was reading it I was like, oh, I see Charles in this, I see Jaylon in this, I see myself in this. So it was really cool that was your intention from the get go, at least in the sense of making something that other people could connect with. What's the part of the story that you're currently are you currently working on it right now or like tinkering with it now?
No, so I'm not touching it. It's on fifth draft right now, and it's with the beta readers.
Gotcha.
So I'm letting them do their thing and not trying to do anything with it. So that's where I'm like in a limbo right now.
Gotcha. Okay. So in that sense, what would you say if you could, if you were allowed to touch it? And believe me, I'm doing the beta reader thing myself right now, so I get it. If you were allowed to touch it, what is the one thing within your story that just like keeps you up at night?
So there's like really one chapter that I had a huge struggle with, mostly because like the whole book is pretty much like third person limited.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a chapter that has villains introduced, and it goes into third person omniscient. I think that's the correct way to say it.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's like inside all their heads, it was really hard to put that all in one chapter without it like where it flows right, because it keeps going back and forth between different people's like mindset. So
Gotcha.
that's the one chapter that drove me nuts.
Fair.
Gotcha. Makes a lot.
Perspectives writing from them are, yeah, they can drive you nuts very, very quickly.
Yeah.
Agreed. Yeah. So that's an interesting dilemma to have. And it's one that I personally seem to run into a bit often, especially like introduction type stuff of trying to unfold and introduce people, and you have and you feel like you have a limited amount of space to do it. So I can see that. Okay, so I was gonna do the pitch first, but you've already kind of told us what it's about, so we don't need to go over that again. So let's get into the meat and potatoes. Why you're here? Why whoever's listening decides to listen to this thing, and let's talk about the story itself. So generally speaking, we want to go over what's working, what we thought was working, what we thought could use some improvement, and just the general emotional the emotional core of the story and all of that kind of stuff. So this is our first time trying it this way. So let us be a little messy as we try to figure it out. But I think we'll go into that. So I guess first things first. We'll start with Charles because he hasn't said a word yet. So
I'm sorry. I am being attentive. I'm reining myself in politely.
But I'll start with Charles. First things first, before we go into what's working, what's not, and all of that. What did you guys think of the story? How did you feel about it? This is another reason why I'm starting with Charles, because I feel like we all know what Jaylan thought about the story. But
Not.
but I want Sam to be able to hear what Jaylan thought about the story as well. So we'll definitely hear it. Charles, what did you think?
So, firstly, I do want to throw this out there. On a technical level, there are elements of the writing that I would give a polish because I've been doing editing for a very, very long time. So it's just my brain. But I did want to throw out there, this was remarkably clear. Very, very often remarkably clear grammatically. So bravo for you to get that. If I was the editor here, it would be much, much more simpler on the grammatical level. So, and I know that has nothing to do with the plot or the essence, but honestly, it's a big deal. So congratulations on that end. I did enjoy the story. I will say what's really interesting is so full disclosure, I'm a very, very big fantasy fan. So I've always grown up with fantasy. I really, really love fantasy. It's always been a very, very special genre that I've dug. There are several instances here where I read some of the descriptions and some of the world, and I thought, that's really bloody good. That's very, very entertaining, very interesting. And the thing that I thought, the two main bits that I thought were really, really fantastic, that really hooked me as someone who knows fantasy quite well, is one, there were lovely, lovely pieces of imagination of what the world is. The Forgive me on the technicalities. Is it fairies or pixies that are
Fairies.
fairies? Okay. So the
Yeah.
fairies, as for example, as a fantasy person, the idea of fairies eating someone not really new for me, but the way it was done was much more uncomfortable and much more brutal than I thought. And that was a really, really good idea. And the whole enchilada has elements of the stuff that I have seen before, but you did it in a really different way that made me think, oh, that's interesting. So even the author falling, there is one specific line, I did write it down. I'm not going to waste time trying to find it because I'm not going to be able to find it. I'm going to be too slow. But there was one hook to this that I was like, that's quite good. That is a very interesting, very compelling conflict. And then again, there were other bits of the whole story that I was like, that is a really cool thing. The trees, the description of these trees, and the sense and the whole detail of forest of pages, scarred pages. That's really, really original and really solid and transporting me there. And the whole premise of that, of why she's here and what she's doing, is really, really good. So those are definitely the strong points that I really, really enjoyed, and I thought that is really, it was unexpected in a good way, because what it is it it's one of those, I don't know if you've had this experience, but it's like you pick up a book and you look at the book and it's like, okay, that's an okay title. The book cover, the artist was thinking things, whatever. And you read the premise and you're like, okay, that's kind of good. I'll give it a shot. And then you start reading the book and you go, oh, okay, so it's going to be in this direction. So I thought that was very, very strong, and I really, really enjoyed that. Very much so. And again, I speak as a fantasy guy who knows, a lot from too many years of reading and watching. So.
Thank you.
Zeidan, what about you?
I agree with Charles that I read it and it felt so refreshing to me because the imagination was original, the descriptions were spot on, and I found it to be very touching to me. I found myself getting choked up at some of the lines. Just hearing characters say, I deserve to have my story told. And I think that is so important because it immediately within the first.
Oh, yes, the ghost. Thought
Yes.
that was freaking brilliant.
Yeah.
Never seen that before. So there were several elements. Sorry to interrupt you.
You're
Sean.
good.
That was something I knew I couldn't. Again, my memory is kind of bad. I'm sorry. I jumped from teaching kids all day to this, so I'm sorry that my brain's frazzled. But I will say I've never ever seen that before, and if I have, again, and I just can't remember, it's definitely not in this form. That really struck me. So sorry, I
Yep.
want to give my compliments to that.
Yes, for sure. That was
I don't know if I can say this, but like the first book that I'm querying right now, that one is dark fantasy with a lot of horror elements. So if you're seeing all that in Inkbound, that's where a lot of that's coming from.
gotcha.
Just, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's so neat. I love the story of where it came from. I feel like some of the best stories that need to be told are ones that almost tell themselves. They tell us that we need to tell them. And I really love that you listened to that prompting and told a story that is going to mean so much to writers and to anyone who loves a writer. Because immediately when I started reading this, I felt like someone had opened up my brain and sat with me as I was going through the struggle of sitting in front of my computer trying to write. And I really loved, it was exciting to me because it was like someone sees me, someone understands me. And it wasn't described as a cliche, just the cliche writer. It was described as, you could tell there was a texture to it where you knew that someone had lived this lifestyle. It was unique, it was fresh, but it was also very relatable. And I feel like every writer and everyone who loves a writer is going to need to read this book because it touches something so deep about why we do what we do, why we write the stories that we write, why we let them destroy us emotionally and mentally and physically. And I really applaud you for telling this story, letting it use you as a vessel to come into the world. And I hope that we can make it into something that no one can resist reading because it's something that everyone does need to read.
Oh,
Um, I also very much enjoyed this story. Um, I was I didn't read the like the little, if there was one, because I didn't see, but the little description of like what it was about before. I just wanted to read it and see what happens, which is new for me because I never do that. Anybody who knows me will tell you, like, I'm the guy who reads the last page of a book before I buy it. I always
Like
have to
a
know.
crazy person.
I have to know it's
I
gonna
am like
happen.
that.
So
I am like that too.
so this was new to go into it and know absolutely nothing about what's going to happen. And from the first page, I was like, oh, okay, this is different. This is different, and I like it. I want to see what happens next. Every single page made me want to keep going. And that also doesn't happen because I have horrible ADHD, and it takes me 98 years to read 3 pages. So when I saw that this was like 41 pages, I was like, oh, this is gonna take forever for me to read. But I was able to read it in its entirety in the morning. Not this morning, yesterday. I read it, just sat down and knocked it out, and I was just so glad that I read it. I agree with Jaylon. This was one of those stories that spoke to me. In wrestling with some of the things that I've been wrestling with as far as creativity and tying one's identity to their creativity and just kind of trying to figure out how to get through the thing that you are trying to work on and try to finish. It just felt real. The thing that really got me to the point where I kind of was about to blubber like a baby was the birthday wish moment. That was all me. That whole paragraph was just, that was me. I was like, oh, I get this. This is me. So I don't read a lot of stuff that makes me feel like, oh, I have to keep seeing what happens, and I really enjoy it. I'm about to give you some high praise that I think everybody else here will know because they know how often I talk about it, and I say it about nothing else. But I have not felt this way reading somebody's story since I read Their Eyes Are Watching God. And so
I thought you
it
were gonna bring
was
up Smallville.
no.
I was bracing for Smallville too.
No, nobody gets Smallville. I'm sorry, but but Their Eyes Were Watching God, which is my favorite book of all time. Until I read another one that becomes my favorite book of all time. For now, it is, and this I felt that, and I was like, if this was fully out and like a whole book, this would be the book that I wake up every morning for morning reading, looking forward to read. And not just like a chore for routine. This is a thing that I can't wait to see what happens next. So yeah, this was fantastic. So thank you for writing it, and thank you for sharing it with us.
thank you.
So let's get into the actual nuts and bolts of the whole thing. So we talk about what's working. We can just kind of lay it all out on the table, what we think, and go from there. At any point in time, Sam, that you just want to tell us to shut up and let you know say what you think, feel free to do it. We're all used to. Well, actually, we're not because none of us know when to tell the other one to stop talking. So, at any point in time,
There you go. There's your clue right now.
so at any point, if you want to let us know, feel free to do so. But we'll start off with Jaylon. You can go down your list of. We'll start with what's working. We'll go down that list first. So,
Okay.
Jaylon, the floor is yours.
I will also say the way that I edit is I view it as a collaboration and we ask questions. So if there is something that I bring up that you have an answer to and it might change my thoughts about it, go ahead and put that in there because that's going to ultimately change, like that's what matters here. So the theme, so powerful. I feel like it set up a very strong arc for the character, which is the number one thing that a strong story needs. So, amazing foundation there. We already talked about how the concepts and the lines of dialogue from characters were so powerful. The way that you introduced characters to us and let us feel like we understood them, we could relate to them, was a really great way to pull people right into your story. I really, really loved that opening. I don't know what to call it because, and this is one of the things that I was going to try and brainstorm together, but the opening pages, I guess, because it's before the prologue, but it's the opening pages. I really loved that. It actually was so real that, because I was reading it with my editor eyes, I immediately questioned, like, wait, is she actually leaving notes here to, like, ask us? As, um, so I really loved the formatting there. The strikeouts were, I love when people use strikeouts well, and I really want it to stay. Even if it's not a traditional thing in manuscripts, I think it really works here, the formatting that you chose. So all the unique things that you did, I think they work so well. I really want them to stay because that's what sets your book apart from so many others and makes it something that is so fresh and so authentic. All the, I mean, we already talked about how all the notes about what it means to be a writer, to live this lifestyle. It comes from a place of authenticity, and that makes it so much more real than just someone giving the cliche, the writer spiel, or just taking that character and saying, yeah, you have all the cliche traits. It was written in a really fresh and new way. The the connection that we had with the characters, and let's see, the reactions to, another thing that I loved is I felt like there was a realisticness to the reactions that Novi had to seeing some of these things. There were a couple instances where I wondered if it could be more realistic or flow better because I had seen her react in such understandable ways in other cases. And so it gave me a clue about what her character was like, and I wanted to see that followed through with, to see if like I was drawing an accurate picture of her or not, or if some of those initial thoughts that I had should be reshaped. And oh, we have to talk about Mr. Pippin. We love Mr. Pippin. I loved the prologue. I think was one of the best. If we had to choose, like, a one thing in this story that was completely stellar, I would say it was Mr. Pippin's prologue. And I really love his voice in there. I love how sharp it was, how witty it was, made me laugh out loud, made me so curious to read the entire rest of the story. So that was a great opening. Loved it. And the last thing I'll say is your metaphors and similes and descriptions were hella good. And some of them were so good that I read them and my reaction was I just wanted to squeal with delight. So that is my laundry list right there of all the things that I loved.
Okay. Charles, what about you? What'd you think?
So firstly, I will say, forgive me. I thought the material before the prologue was you saying things, which by the way is quite good because that means that it seemed very natural. But that's just me. I can miss things. But I did want to note this, that now that when I found that, I was like, oh, that's what it was. I did think it was a very interesting way of opening the piece, which was good. I very, very much enjoyed the prologue with said ferret because it was very unexpected and it was different, but it also gave this really interesting framework because now from here on out, I know this animal has a very particular brain that's going on behind the scenes. So I thought that was very, very good. Again, I did think a lot of the world was very interesting in this very imaginable way. Because the thing with fantasy that I always really love is when people can make something that you've never seen before. So Terry Pratchett had once said that fantasy was about believing in something that wasn't real. And so there's a lot of elements here of the world that were like that I really enjoyed. I also, again, really appreciated I appreciated two factors. I think the drama, the conflict of what Novi is doing here and what she has to do is very, very good. But again, I also really appreciate not actually. I'll specify this. I was going to say not the bitterness of the characters, because that's kind of there, but there was something that was more intriguing to me. And I think what really intrigued me was the line, if I'm remembering this correctly, was basically you poured your doubts into the world, and therefore, I'm paraphrasing, sorry, everything has kind of turned to crap or has been troubled. I find that immensely fascinating because we've seen writers are gods and they're bad gods because they're humans or they smoke or they drink too or smoke too much or drink too much or yada 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 yada. But that sense that the world has become sick because of said author's personal struggles, along with having to figure things out and do the work, I think all of that material really, really works. Also, on a technical level, another thing I think is really working is so we have a prologue, it starts in the apartment, and she's got her stuff going on, and then a night comes in. Okay, great, fantastic. What about episode two? So this is a personal stickler for me. Everyone always goes, "Oh, the pilot's so boring." For me, pilot's fine. What I find more interesting is can you do episode two of a television show? Because yeah, we can all do the setup, but what happens when the setup is done and you gotta now live with it? Honeymoon phase over, marriage is on. And I did think the way this was framed, that each time it moved forward, it moved at a very solid pace, which is very, very good. I thought that was very excellent. Also, by the way, there were several instances. I'm going to see if I can find a specific note here. There was one. Oh, my thing is just going completely whack. I apologize if I can't find this, but I'm trying to do it from memory here then. There were several instances where there were moments in terms of action that had very good descriptions. Not just in terms of like nice wordplay, but just really good. It flowed very well. Even and also the elements of it. For example, I did find one note. This is not exactly what I'm talking about, but something I really did like was she choked on a sob, her stomach twisting as she instinctively looked up. The choking on a sob, very right. I noticed that that's a reaction. That is quite exactly what really makes it run smoothly. So in essence, much of what I said before, but also I think the story works functionally in terms of how it is presented. It is running smoothly, which is nice because it, Jared hinted at, we get to read it and it's not a chore. Not that reading is a chore. Why am I saying that? I have a bunch of books behind me. Why am I saying like? But in that sense of I know I'm in good. There's a good driver in front and driving the bus is what I'm trying to say, and having that confidence, I think, is quite good. I'm trying to say, am I correct in that the prince, who is different than how he was described in the material before the prologue? Did I read that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, I thought so because that was really unexpected. Because I was like, okay, so the prince is going to be this, and very immediately, very different kind of guy. And I thought that was really brilliant. So it circles back to the beginning. You set up the reader expectation and you do something different, but it made sense. So something I really did like is I didn't feel that none of these characters, forgive me, I'm using a phrase here, they didn't approach Novi as in, this isn't your grandpa's fantasy book series. It didn't have that kind of attitude to them. They felt much more intimate with said creator, something more honest, like the actors without the role. And I thought that was really good. There's all these little details that honestly I feel like don't need to um, raise you up on that you're doing well, because I think you already know you're doing well. Or if you don't, you're doing it naturally. So the trees are already blossoming on their own, which is very good. So
Thank
these
you.
are, these are elements I think are working quite well.
Um, Great. So I when I first started reading this, yeah, the first thing I would say, I think we've all kind of touched on it, is the first page before the prologue. And I agree. I thought at first, I was telling Jaylon this, I thought it was your note to us. So I was like, oh, she's putting us in her frame of mind as she's writing, and then I was like, oh, wait a minute, no, this is a character. So it's like, okay, cool, I get it, I dig it.
We're not the
Um,
center of the universe.
exactly, it's not all about us. Sorry about that. No, but it was a really cool way of doing it. So that leads me kind of into the first thing that's really really working. So much so that I'm almost no, I am. I'm jealous of you. And is your voice. You have a very 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 strong voice. And we've talked about it on Let's Talk Stories before, about the importance of having a distinct voice and how to get a distinct voice. And there are different ways for everybody. Some people it's just kind of, you read a bunch of stuff and eventually something sticks. Some people you just naturally have one. Some people are like traumatized at a young age and it just kind of flows naturally through your pain. Whatever it is, whatever got you to the dance, you are a magnificent dancer, and it is wonderful the way that you speak to us. It's not often that I read somebody's words and I think, oh, this is a human being. Like, there's fictional characters, and that, and like, even if they're a really good character that you really really like, you still know this is a fictional character. Novi felt like a person that I know. Like, I could pick up my phone and I could text her and talk to her, and she would talk back, and that doesn't happen very often. So you were very, very. I will tell you, I tell you this because it's important for me. You're an artist as well, so as an artist, I know the importance of validation, and I want you to know that you are incredibly talented, and that was fantastic. It was really, really working well for you. The premise itself, I also really, really like. There is a quote by Neil Gaiman that's, regardless of what we think of, I personally think of the man at this point in time, I will say that there is a quote of his that he says, you write until the story tells itself, until the characters walk in the door and say, why did you do that to me? And I feel that this entire story so far in the chapters that we got is this in its essence. It's this, and I was telling Jaylon this, that I was kind of jealous because I was like, I've had this idea forever of, like, I feel like this cruel god that does all kinds of horrible things to my characters all the time, and what would it be like if one day they just showed up at my door and was just like, hey bro, what's up? Like, so the fact that that this is even better than what I could have come up with, but it's fantastic that you did that. So I really really like the premise. The thing that I like about the premise is something that I have to question also within the what's not working. So I'll deal with that then. But I will say the vibe that I got from this, and I'm not sure if this was the intent, was that this was, as best as I can describe it, is Princess Bride meets Deadpool, and it just, I really really liked that. So yeah, that was really cool. I think it's really cool that you're doing it. It's different. It's different, and it's fresh, and I think that's a fun way of looking at it. The other thing that was really working was Novi's setup in general. Her general personality, as I said, the protagonist is, you wrote a really really great protagonist. She's my favorite part of the story, which is, she's the driver of the story, so she should be, but she's truly my favorite part. as well as in addition to Mr. Pippin, who Mr. Pippin, the prologue was great. I loved him in the prologue. I now want to name one of my cats Mr. Pippin just because of it. But it's yeah, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed that, as well as the world. I think your world building was really good. Once we got into that fantasy world, the trees with the post-it notes. I was like, oh, I can see that. I can see that. That's so good. I was like, I want to go out back and like put post-it notes on my trees because that just needs to be a thing that exists. So it was just like it was fantastic. You did some really great world building, and it's just well designed. So those would be the things that I really loved, that really stood out to me. That made my soul happy as I read it. So yeah, that's what's working. Any thoughts before we jump into the other side of the pool, if you will?
No, no.
All right. So for what's for what needs work or what's not working or what didn't click. I think what didn't click is the best way to put it, because I wouldn't even say it's not working. It's just we need some clarification or whatever. All that said, we'll start with Jaylon again. Your thoughts on what didn't click for you?
I think that the first thing, we'll start with the beginning because I'm going to start singing a Sound of Music, but I really should not because I have a horrible singing voice, so skipping that. I really loved the opening, as we all said, but when I first read it, it did confuse me enough that I didn't really get it. I didn't click with it until I went back once I had reached the end of the sample and read it again. There were some things where I didn't connect up as fast as I probably should have, that the fantasy world she ends up in is the world that she was creating in those first pages. And also the fact that it was a first set of pages before the prologue kind of made me confused about where we were in the story and
Could I
where
interject
we
for
go.
a moment? Can I interject for a moment on that?
Yes, go for it.
I think what we can solve that quite simply, instead of naming at the very top first draft dash Inkbound,
Mhm.
you probably could solve this whole problem, not problem, excuse me, this whole confusion by renaming that title. Of you can have something of notes. We'll go for today, April 11th, 2025, and frame it like that. If you title it differently, probably tells the reader automatically where we're at.
There you go. Yeah, so like
Okay.
brainstorms like that, just a way to kind of connect up things faster. Another thing that would have made me connect up faster that she was in the fantasy world that she had kind of half baked in that first section was if she said, instead of feeling lost and just completely lost when she ends up there, I wonder if she starts feeling that it kind of feels like this vaguely familiar deja vu fever dream. Because I feel like, I mean, there's so many things that I wrote years ago and I look back on and I totally forgot about, and I say, like, who wrote that? That was not me. There's no way I wrote that. But I feel like when you design a fantasy world, it does get into your DNA in a specific way. And I wonder if she had that reaction where it kind of felt like a fever dream or a deja vu. Even if she couldn't place it directly, that would have clued me in that it's something that I've seen before. And then it would have cued my brain to say, oh, go back to those first few pages that you read. This answers the question. So I don't know if you have any brainstorms about that, if what we said kind of vibes with what your vision was, where you were going. But there's, for what it's worth, that's out there. I find it interesting that you said the chapter that was giving you the most grief had to do with first or third person omniscient and third person limited, because there were a few places where I did notice the perspective flipping, in a sense, if that term makes sense. but it kind of felt like we were sliding along the scale, and it took me out of the mindset that I wanted to stay in, because it was Novi's eyes that I was looking through. And it's so hard to get perspectives right. And I say this from like an editor standpoint. I can see it in other people's writing, but it always confuses me. So I can only imagine like writing it that way. It's a whole thing. Like, hurts my brain. So not that I'm saying I have more knowledge than you, because I do not. It's just easier to see when you're from an outside perspective. But seeing those slips in perspective, I wonder if going through a read through specifically to have a solid line of point of views and what the narrator voice knows and doesn't know would make it all feel a little bit more cohesive and keep your reader in the mindset that they're trying to be in. One of the lines for an example of what I'm saying, the line that I had written down was Novi's thought she had an internal dialogue, and she said, "Wait, why did I have to include zombies? Probably all those late night Call of Duty sessions with Avery. She thought it was cool, and well, I wanted her approval, so I added them. Yeah, not so cool now." There's a very, very small fix that can just make that feel so much clearer, because when you're having an internal dialogue, you're not telling yourself something that you already know, if that makes sense. That makes it seem like you're jumping out of the point of view that you're writing from. So if you rewrite it to, and you don't have to go word for word on this, but something like, why did I have to listen to Avery and include zombies just to get her approval? The late night Call of Duty sessions she dragged me into were bad enough. Something like that keeps the perspective that you're writing from consistent. And then I wonder if it would make the problem that you have in the other chapter feel more natural to solve, because you have better lines drawn in your own mind, instead of, because when you're writing it, you're hopping between all these different perspectives. So it's really hard to separate it out in your mind as you're writing it. But then when you go back and rewrite it, that's where you can give yourself a set perspective, a set pair of eyes to look through with the rules of what they know and what they don't know. And then you can make edits that make it all feel more cohesive, because you're only reading it through one perspective that time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if that helps, that might be one thing that helps that troublesome chapter. We can also keep talking about it later. You can give us some more details on it, and we can see if we can come up with some other brainstorms too. The other thing was I agree that the descriptions of the action scenes were super great. However, there were a couple parts where I kind of felt like an action that was supposed to happen quickly happened slowly because it was interrupted by description. So keeping the action tighter would make it feel like, because it was paced well, just sometimes it didn't feel like it was paced well because a quick action was interrupted by a slower description. So those are just, and it didn't happen very often. It was just a couple times that I noticed. But doing those little changes will also help to keep your reader going along even more than they already are, because it's an amazing story. And as Jared said, I mean, you're hooked and you want to keep turning pages. So that's all I got for now. So I will pass the mic to Charles, unless you have something else to interject before we move on. Sam.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Charles?
All right, so for me, really quick, before I get into this, I really know specifically, I'd like to know, if you do know, because maybe this is something that you're finding out or etc., but I'd like to know, what is the what is the intended age of the audience you're going for? I'd like to know the exact tone of the piece in terms of the kind of humor. And let me see. Oh, okay. And I'd like to know if you're trying, or, excuse me, aiming. If you are aiming for a very super moving piece, like is obviously moving of a piece of fantasy here, or if you're going for a more having fun fantasy.
I'd say it's more fun.
Okay, so it is
And
more
I
fun.
really am like purposely kind of making fun of like the romantasy. Um, you're gonna get more into it later, but I kind of challenged myself and tried to throw in as many tropes as possible because I was trying to go for like the most, and I think I went over 50.
Wow.
Okay,
That
Yeah.
explains things for me. 'Cause that explains some
So
of the questions that I had. So yeah.
okay,
yeah, I'm really poking fun at romantasy specifically in this book. The second book will do a different genre, but yeah.
That's super
okay.
fun.
So
Target audience, it is for adults. I did kind of wing it more towards millennials because I'm a millennial, and there's a lot of hidden references in there, which you'll get more into towards the end too. And I really start breaking like the fourth wall, I'd say about towards Act Two. So you're gonna see that a lot more.
okay, and we're saying this, we're saying the core content of the story we are reading that the reader has in their hands is the satire, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this alters slightly what I'm going to. Well, not slightly. This is we're going to go instead of a shade of darker red. This will be a shade of lighter red. Is my point? Okay, so to that end, this is a to this end of a question. Is novella Quillheart a joke name to this end?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all,
Yeah.
very funny. Okay,
Yeah. Everything's kind of on purpose and some. Yeah. If you think
okay,
there's a reason, there probably is.
okay. So we'll have to keep this in mind. I'm very dumb. I'm very dumb, and I don't pick up satire all that well, even though like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia is one of my favorite shows, so go figure. But I'm very dumb. So to this end, I was looking through this and I was like, this seems very, kind of juvenile, and that didn't really make a lot of sense to me because I'm like, well, we got this going on, we get this going on. Why is this? But I think that's quite funny, and to that end, now that I see in that perspective, I go, oh, that's very funny. That's very good. That's very silly. And honestly, by the way, I was picking this up already. Having a fun fantasy is really refreshing. I'm sure you know, there are so many like serious fantasies, and they got the big trilogy book deal and dark serious concepts and blah blah blah. And I'm just like, can't we just have Red Sonja go and kill a bunch of goblins, please? So credit seriously for that tone. And I was already picking up that tone, so that's why when you say this, it doesn't come across as completely new to me. I will say though, I think, and again, keep in mind, I'm dumb. Maybe this is just me, and please understand too. Sometimes you look for editorial help, and it just doesn't click because it's not quite me, or for example me. But you'll find other people and it makes sense. So maybe I'm the odd one out. I will say to all of this end, I would. I don't know how to implement this, but I guess I would kind of. Okay, I think I know how to do this. I would try and let the audience know a little bit what is a joke and what's not. So to this end, and this might be a little crazy, so please forgive me. But there is one specific thing. Where are they? Okay, so we have I totally blank on the word here. The repairman. Okay,
Hmm.
I think it's this. Okay, it's the repairman, and he says, like, kids these days, and no, 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 no. And I was thinking, I was like, well, and I made the note, I'm like, I think you can kind of change that dialogue because I think we've seen that before. We've seen the old man be a jerk. It's a cartoon thing, and I've seen it a million times. Maybe we could slightly do this differently and still have an element. But, and this is my theory is, and correct me if I'm wrong, My theory is that's kind of a part of the joke or a little bit of the joke tone. So here's what I'm thinking. And so, Jared, you mentioned Princess Bride. So something that works with Princess Bride and these kinds of stories in general is it's not joke, 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 joke. There's always a tone of wit, which is solid, but it's not a joke, joke, joke every time because I think you need to basically breathe in to breathe out. If you're breathing out all the time, it's just, and there's nothing. There's no sense of exhilaration. So maybe these slight little details you can put in, not seriousness, but maybe the tone can be this one guy, Gus. There's the name. I am so sorry. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I'm having very bad memory stuff with a lot of things lately, so I apologize. But I think what you can maybe try is have Gus be normal and just ordinary instead of something a little bit more heightened. And again, this is a theory of mine. It may not work, it may not, etc. But this is my suggestion. So take it as take what you need as you see fit. But my suggestion is maybe to, with some elements, make it a little bit more serious so that the laughs do come a little bit harder because we're not constantly laughing and we're out of breath, metaphorically speaking. So maybe those elements. But to that end, I think. Sorry,
I was going to say, if I can have my turn to interject, because you touched on two things that I forgot to say. The first one being, I was questioning if the handyman, if Gus having to actually come and fix the wall was necessary to be in the story if we were focusing on keeping the pace going. And I was wondering, would Novi be someone who would be anxious to call someone and would, put that off until tomorrow? But now that Charles brings that up, I can see there might still be a purpose, and maybe there's a purpose that becomes clear later on down the line that I was just unaware of because we didn't read far enough. But if there is a good purpose, you keep those things in, for sure. And the other thing I was going to say is the interesting thing about editing is very much like you have people giving you advice, but it's all from different perspectives, and not everyone's perspective is going to be 100% accurate because reading is very subjective. Art is subjective. So that's why it's really great when you have a whole bunch of editors that you can collaborate with and you can get a range of different perspectives and have that conversation back and forth. So that's why I really love having writers like you here with all of us, because it does help keep that conversation a conversation. And I feel like we actually solve some problems and get clarity as opposed to just someone throwing out their suggestions from a perspective where, maybe they aren't necessarily correct because it's subjective. So, all right, I'm done, Charles. Floor's back to you.
I was going to say, to this end, I did find this note. This generally made me laugh. The bowl clattered to the floor, the popcorn scattering across the hardware with soft, useless plinks. It didn't even slow him down. I can't even say that without laughing. That really made me laugh. I don't know why, but again, I think in terms of the satire and having fun, that's really funny. So to that end, another element that you can maybe kind of plus things up a bit is, so she says he stepped forward unfazed, and she goes, "Seriously, Novi groaned. I feel if you part of the satire element for me, and again, you're probably thinking, I already know this because I've been in the book's head for so long. So again, take this as you will. Is I feel part of it is it's saying, yeah, knights are all well and good, and you got the shining armor until you have to go to the bathroom. So it's basically taking things down from their lofty pedestals. So what I kind of wrote is I thought maybe instead of saying seriously, I'm like, well, what would a person say? Because seriously, I'm thinking, well, that's a lot of theater. What would she say? And I said, well, maybe she just goes, shit, shit, shit. And I was thinking because she cusses later, that would be an element. So that's kind of the essence of what I'm talking about with that.
Okay.
That's my suggestion. To this end, when we're getting to the naked prince, maybe you can not tap dance around the point of his crotch, and just say his crotch. And make fun of it. If he's a wild man, it's unkempt. Maybe you can make a joke that's just like she can barely see anything because it was so unkempt. So that kind of sense of take things down from the pedestal more specifically may help a dumb person like me pick up a little bit of what you're saying. But all to that end, the only now that that is clear, and I was getting a feeling that that's where it was all headed, but I want to make sure. Which in that case, it really really works. I think it's great because you get to eat your cake about all the what she's going through and when it's relatable, and then you have the silliness. So well done. But I will say for me, I think as a slight detail, I don't like to be this guy, but I'm just a little bit worried. The Inkbound title, unless it's very specifically titled, may be a little bit of a problem solely because of Cornelia Funke's, I hope I pronounced her name, Inkspell series. So I
Yeah.
didn't know, were you going for a parody for that?
So I was at one point, but then, yeah, I saw that a lot of people didn't like that it was too close to Inkheart title.
Inkheart. I knew it was getting the sequel. Okay, yeah. And again, it's a great title. It was just a comment of like a little bit of concern for that, because the thing is readers are gonna go yeah yeah yeah, so you want to get rid of it.
Yeah.
But I will say for me, I kind of felt the main two. Now that this is all said and done, then, and we know what's what, the two details one is more of a question and one is my main source of I think maybe we can shift this around. Is I felt personally, this is just for me, so I felt that Pippin was a little too snarky toward her, because the prologue he felt a little bit wiser, a little bit more christened by the world, and still cared for her, but he's like, he sees the real her is what I'm trying to say, I suppose. And when he was talking to her, it felt most of the time he was kind of berating her. And to be fair, that falls in the tradition of Sailor Moon. We'll have to put another dime. He mentioned Sailor Moon again on the podcast. Excuse me. But in Sailor Moon, the cat Luna always makes fun of Usagi, the main character. So that's totally fine. But for me, Pippin had more of this Jiminy Cricket-esque style to him in the prologue. And I was like, oh, he's so cuddly, he's so nice. And then when he began talking a little bit more, he felt a little bit more snarky to me. For me, I guess a little too much toward her. And again, that's definitely a taste thing. But I was hoping he'd be a little bit nicer. Now, he can make fun of her all live long day, that's fine. But I didn't feel as much of a warmth between them that I may have wanted. The second detail, too, is a little... we'll have to tap dance around this point so we don't get into spoilers. And this is my final point. He's talking too much. What we say, Jerry, about he's talking too much.
You're good.
So this is my final point. Is there a reason that the first reactions, other than the fact that she's in a crazy situation, is there a reason that the first thing Novi has when she's in this world is like, oh crap, I'm in, this is a nightmare. Is that going to be more developed in the plot in terms of how she feels about the story and why she's writing it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It definitely all ties in towards the end.
Okay.
And it kind of goes with like that theme of like what separates reality and fiction.
Okay, all right. So, get rid of that. Get rid of what I was going to say then. I was going to say that I was like, well, if I had fallen into one of my stories, unless it was in a dangerous place, I wouldn't be so antagonistic towards it. So I want to make sure that was an element of that, of keeping that in mind. But there was one other element about that. Oh, I was going to say, I would say too, to keep... Well, no, Jair and Jayla have already said that, so never mind. I'm done talking. I apologize. Again, I've been dealing with children all day long. I don't know how to turn it off. But yeah, okay, that makes sense then. Then that makes sense. I would, as a whole, then I would say, and again, maybe it's just me, try to make the audience know, let them in a little bit easier on the joke. Try to make not everything, or try to make places to land as they're bouncing along, if that metaphorically makes sense. I made my comment about Pippin maybe nicer. Oh, one teeny tiny detail, and I apologize because it's going to be very, very tedious. unless there is a very specific point, I felt there were a few too many similes. I felt there were a few too many like this or as this, which is pretty simple. Just go to Microsoft Word or whatever program you're using, find like, and just
Mhm.
see which ones you want to cut and not. But that's just a quick thing. I felt there were a few too many likes.
Okay.
Excuse me. But yeah, so there you go. And by the way, I'm so sorry that I am the person who didn't get the joke, but honestly, I was picking it up and I did think there many of it was quite funny. So,
Yeah.
there you
Thank you.
As a reader, yeah, having that like, oh, we talk about writers need validation. Readers need validation too. Otherwise, they start shying away from something because they think, I don't know if I'm correct in assuming this or not. So I'm just gonna not touch it, not fully commit to it. So that I
Readers are
feel like you
lazy.
made.
Readers and TV watchers and movie watchers, audiences are lazy. Period. So they're smart as hell, but they're also lazy as hell. And if you string them along or make them think one thing, and then they're like, "I can't figure it out," I'm not gonna. It's because we live in the TikTok age where 60 seconds or less. So yeah, I'm really glad that Charles asked that question about the demographic and whether or not it was supposed to be satire or not, because that definitely drastically changes most of the things that I was thinking. Because in my mind, this was a fantasy, a romantasy story that just had a really, really humorous protagonist. Who just had a protagonist with a bit of personality, and so. But now that I'm seeing, oh no, now that I'm revisiting the story in my mind, I'm like, oh okay, I get that now, and I get that now. So all of that's to say, I think I agree with Charles too in the space of finding little ways to plant those breadcrumbs in the story. This is one of those moments where I would have to sit with the story a little bit to really see how to work that in there. But I do like the idea of sitting some breadcrumbs in there of revealing to the audience, and it may become a little bit easier for them to understand as they go further in the story anyway. But even in the DNF age that we live in, it's you want to make sure that early on you sort of explain in some way, shape, or form this is more satirical than it is going to be hardcore fantasy or whatever. That would be helpful because to be as self-deprecating as Charles goes, I also am dumb. So, Jaylon's the only smart one amongst
This
us.
is false. This is
So that was it. I did have a question about Novi. Does Novi know? Me and Jaylon were talking about this yesterday. Does Novi know self-defense? And I asked this question because when she does go over the rules of self-defense, it does feel like she has some kind of knowledge of self-defense, even if it was like a one-time like karate class that she did. It seems like she knows based on that response, but I wanted to be clear before I made any assumptions about that.
So as far as like physically, no, but as far as like fact-wise, she knows a lot of facts because as like writers, we kind of learn really random stuff. So like at random times, she spews out like random facts. A lot of it has to do with her like ADHD mind. So she is supposed to be an ADHD character, and like that's highly emphasized in the story a lot. So you'll kind of see her losing track and getting really distracted. I do that on purpose.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, Jaylon did say that yesterday. That was where her brain went,
I
and
was
I was
like,
saying,
I know this person. I know
Right.
this person because this person is me.
and I was
She has
saying
like
that.
a lot of lists too, like in her head. Like there's a lot of times where she'll start listing things, and that's her mentally trying to get herself to focus. Almost like
Right,
if you're writing a story, you kind of put down the notes, like so you stay on track.
I love
right,
that.
Yeah.
exactly. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I get that. I would say, while I do agree with that, and Jaylon did call it again to sort of quote Charles in this situation for the dummies in the back like myself, I would find more visual cues to make that clear. So, for instance, if she has on her desk or her coffee table or wherever her laptop is, if she has like a, you know, she sits her popcorn bowl down on the top of a bunch of self-defense books that she's reading, just so that I'm clear. Oh,
Okay.
she reads them instead of she knows it. That kind of thing. Just that would be the only thing I would have done differently. But yeah, because now that I know that, it changes what I think about her in general. And then also with this being, when you also mentioned the tropes of Romantasy, the only other thing that I was going to say was that it really took me out of it when you started talking about, when you harped on how long Creed was hot, and I was like, the first thing that went through my mind was, okay, maybe this book is the I didn't know it was supposed to be satire, so I thought, okay, well, maybe this is, I'm not the demographic. Maybe this is going to be for, like, you know, young adult women or adult women and new adult women that, you know, and you know, every single Romantasy book that I've read, this is exactly why I put it down. Because I'm like, okay,
it was
he's hot,
quite
cool.
good, by the way. I did want to note that. I was like, very good. This is a good description.
Okay, for me, it was more like, I got it. He's hot. Let's move on. And then it was like the next paragraph, hot. And I was like, all right, okay, I'm done. All right, you know. So it's like, but now that I see it in that context, I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of hilarious, because every single dark romantasy or just romantasy book I've ever read, that is always the thing that annoys the hell out of me. And so I'm always just like, how many times do you have to say it? I've never seen somebody in public and being like, oh, they're hot, and then I see them down the next aisle, they are hot. You know, it doesn't work like that. So it just feels weird to me, but I'm glad that I know that. The only other thing that stuck out to me was Pippin. So this aligns a little bit with what Charles was saying. Except when Charles is talking about his snarkiness to Novi, for me, I agree that Pippin came off as very this wise. In my mind, I saw Pippin as like this little ferret with little tiny glasses on that was just like this, you know, this little wise man, and I was just like, I want to own him and I want to have him in my hoodie pocket all the time. But then then when I was reading it, I was like, there were these moments where his humor felt like it undercut some of the moments, some of the more moments that felt like they should have been serious. Like, so when some of the scary stuff was happening, I felt like, oh, he's cracking a joke, and I get it, but I feel like the archetype that he is the sidekick, and as the sidekick, unless he was from Quellara, I figure this is all rather new to him as well, unless he is from there, and in that case, you know, that's interesting. But if he's not, I felt like it was, it's all new to him, so maybe why, you know, wouldn't he be scared too? Wouldn't he be freaking out a little bit? So maybe it's just more, and maybe I don't want to spoil, if that's a spoiler type thing, we don't have to go into too much of that, but that was the kind of questions that were in my mind of just like, is he being too funny too often, in moments where it felt like it should be a little bit scary? It felt like I was getting there and I was like, oh, this is kind of creepy, and then all of a sudden here comes, you know, Pippin with like a joke, and I'm like, oh, okay, we don't have to worry about it, it's gonna be fine. So that was the only thing that really threw me a little bit, but again, that could totally be a spoiler thing, so I'm not going to put you on the spot on that one. This is some MCU level information. So yeah, that was pretty much everything that I had. Everything else, all the other stuff that I had, really is summed up and explained once I knew who the book was for, what the genre really was supposed to be. Now I feel even more confident in the statement of it being Princess Bride meets Deadpool, because it gave that vibe, and now that I see that, I like that, you know, there's this breaking of the fourth wall within it. There's this consistent nature of like, the action's really good too. Pacing was good. I agree with Zeidan. There were certain parts, and this could purely be just my own personal taste. But when Prince Creed shows up and he transforms from the wolf to his human form, I felt that the description of him changing went on a little longer than I'd liked, because it just felt like it just kept going. And it was cool. It was great description. It was fantastic. It was well written. It was just one of those things where it just felt like I was in the moment, and then I got taken out of the moment because it took too long to get to that. other thing. And there was one other part where that happened. In the moment I can't remember exactly where it was. But when we do our written thing to you, I'll make sure that I know where it is, and have that for you. But other than that, everything else was working. So that's fantastic. Did you have any thoughts before we jump into the second to last part before we say goodbye?
No, no, everything you guys are bringing up is fair points.
Awesome. Okay. So the last part of this is going to be through the emotional and thematic lens. I find that this part is important because it's going to tell you what your story for a little Gen Z expression, what your story is giving to the rest of us.
That's not slang. That is natural language.
No, it's like so. But
Lord.
but
Anyway,
so
sorry.
what the feelings are, what the message is actually sending, and obviously all of us are going to have. Well, I don't know if we'll all have different opinions. We oftentimes end up having similar ones, but that way you can see if there's some cohesiveness to your theme, and if we're right or if we're way off, and all of that. So, you guys, Charles, I'll start with you. What did you feel like the thematic core of this story was? What did it feel like it was really about to you?
It felt to me a lot about responsibility to oneself. Because for me, stick with me here, I didn't relate to Navi's writer struggles. I've been doing this for too long. I've suffered for too long. I have my story of my life, myself, doesn't jive with her story. But the moment that it all became the characters not going, God, the creator, why don't you do this for me? But they see her and they already know that she is not perfect, and they perceive her own self-criticisms as one of the sicknesses of their world. It didn't feel like they were bitter to her or annoyed with her or mad at her so much as disappointed and okay, come on, let's figure this out. That kind of attitude extremely hit me, most personally, because with my main project, it was supposed to be a side project 10 years ago, and then became a major project, then became my baby, and then I realized I had to do good by the characters. I had to do right by the characters, and it felt. This is what I think. Jaylan and Jared, I sent you a Bluey GIF about this with Bingo and Bluey, torturing their poor father. I'm like, this is me now. I am not. I am not in control anymore, and I have to do something right. And so the responsibility of that really has struck me, and that just. Do a little patch at me. Very good. Jared, you have to see Emperor's New Groove, for Lord's sake.
Sorry.
This is getting
Sorry.
ridiculous. Anyway,
I'm
sorry. For the listeners, Jared has not seen The Emperor's New Groove, and he is a lesser person for it. I'm sorry. But in any case, it really hit me. But to that end, I think what tied a lot of that together was, and I hope I'm not going completely left field and you're going, what is he talking about? But for me, it felt like the sense of responsibility to the characters, yes, but also responsibility to herself of what she needs to give herself. For example, by the way, the whole detail of I meant to bring this up before because it clicked in my head about she played Call of Duty Zombies for someone, she didn't even like it. Oh, we all know how that feels. And that sense of responsibility where it's like I think why we all criticize ourselves in those situations, it's not because we did something to try and get closer to someone that we wanted to become closer to or for them to like us, is that we put ourselves in a bad situation that we didn't want to do. So it is that to get what we wanted. So it's that sense of responsibility to the self. And that was the vibe I was getting from a lot of this. Right down to the characters of these ghosts. You know, I was the best minor character that you have, and you deleted me. And by the way, excellent, excellent, excellent
Mm.
use of the word deleted. Because when I read that, I was like, well, deleted, that seems like a modern. And then I stopped myself and said, oh, no, 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 that's brilliant. Because it creates a character's soul down, unfortunately, to, in using our modern terminologies, the digital pixels that they are on a word processor. So right down to that, I think that was the theme that tied everything together. So honestly, really, you do really have like a couple of really hardcore things here and some very silly things and fun things. Like I said, fun fantasy is so lacking for a long time. I don't even want to say today. I think it's been this case for the 90s, the 80s, a long time. So that was the theme, the central core of it that I got from it.
I will agree. I think it's so, when you have such a powerful theme, sometimes it can only be delivered through satire, through humor, because, or through like lighthearted appearing things. Because when you have something so heavy, you have to have something to digest it with. So I think the really brilliant writers know how to marry those two things very well, which you did here. Having the lines, "You owe me a story," um, "Clara is falling apart because you didn't believe in your own story." You're the writer, you poisoned it with your doubts, your half-finished idea. Magic doesn't thrive on uncertainty. And then telling her, you made it real. Every word you wrote shaped this place. And when you abandoned it, you broke it. Those things, those lines hit me so hard, and it really drove home what I saw emerging as a theme, which was what we talk about here all the time. Stories have power. Fiction isn't just make believe. Words are immortal choices that you wrote down in ink, and they have real consequences for real people, even if it's from your imagination. And that knowledge is very empowering and important for writers to understand when they're writing stories. So I go back to my point. I think this is a book that any writer will need to read, and anyone who loves a writer will need to read. So that was my take on what the theme was, what spoke to me from my perspective.
Uh, First of all, I admire you. I admire this. I envy your ability to do satire. First of all, but I also, because I when I think about the story, and every story I read, my instinct is to always think about what would I have done, how would I have done it. And I know me and my story would have been infinitely darker than yours is, and that's just because I'm a broken human being. So, but nonetheless, I think I love that that you did that. I wanted to write down my thought on this just because I had all these thoughts and I wanted to put them in clear things. So if you don't mind, I just want to read that to you as what I thought. First of all, I saw this as a story about abandonment, fear of failure, and the importance, the comeuppance, if you will, of unfinished work. There is something deeper in the story that hit me personally. It's not just clever or fun or sharp, it's true. Under the humor and the meta commentary, the fantasy tropes, there's a cry for something. There's for constancy, for completion, and for being seen and stayed for. And that starts with Novi. She wants a family, a home, a place where love doesn't vanish the minute it becomes inconvenient. She wishes for it on a birthday cupcake, and in that moment, I felt the real heart of the book. Because the same fear of being left is what seems to drive the entire story. Novi wishes for something permanent, but she's the one who actually abandons. She ghostwrites for others, and she walks away from her own world. And now she's inside it, forced to face the wreckage of what she walked away from. Every character that she meets, Creed, the Hollowborn, the setting itself, is just a reflection of this. its abandonment or abandoned, corrupted by her silence, a metaphor for what happens when we don't stay to finish the things that we create. It hit me because I personally know the feeling. I've got stories that I haven't finished because of my own fear, because of the same trauma of if I finish it and no one sees it, what does that say about me? This story confronts that, or at least I feel that that's what it's trying to confront. So yeah, that is ultimately what I thought the theme was. And it's a story that similar to the story that we went over with when Charles did his. It's another story that makes me feel seen. And it could just be a matter of timing and the things that are happening in my life. But whatever it is, in this exact space and time, this story made me feel seen and understood, and I related to it on an almost molecular level. So, yeah, that's my thought. I don't know if any of us were on the right track or if none of us were. But yeah, let us know what you think.
A lot of the story is kind of like the core to it is that it is a love letter for writers. It's a love letter for stories and the stories we tell. Without like spoiling anything, it has a lot to do with like how much of us goes into these stories. So, for instance, this is a really important one, but who are our characters to us? That's something that gets revealed. And then also just how much of our trauma, our memories, our relationships, and stuff like that, they go into these stories. And you can't really control it. You know, there's sometimes when you're writing and you know how they say like the characters take over the plot?
Mm-hmm.
Or
It's so true.
You know, the side character is not supposed to be a side character, ends up being a main character. Stuff like that we kind of can't really control because maybe there's a reason for that is something that goes through with Novi in this story, is kind of learning to let go of that control in some way and finding your voice.
I love that.
I love it. I love it. It's fantastic. So, all that being said, the last thing that we would want to say before we get out of here is if you could ask, or if you can get just one question from us today on whether it be a way to improve what we saw or anything about the story, what would that question be? Or do you have any questions that you would want us to answer for you?
So, like, my main thing was I wanted to build a character that was relatable and a story that was relatable to writers. Because, like, I know I keep saying this, but, like, it really is for writers. So that was, like, the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure that I was on point. Like, it's not just stuff I'm struggling with, like, other people could relate to. And I think you guys kind of answered that a lot. So, I mean, that was my biggest thing was, like, am I on point with this? Or is this just something that's, like, super crazy and I just went with it?
Yeah, I think you were definitely on point. You did that. That's awesome.
Us writers are super crazy, let's be real. And having someone who can recognize it and, like, point it out from the inside is, again, makes me feel seen. So.
I would say this, and this is for the listeners as well as I'm not sure how familiar you are with filmmaking terms. And Jaylon, you probably know what I'm going to say, but in film, there's this thing called it's called filmmaker porn, and what it is it's when you make films about making films. And so this to me felt like literary porn because it genuinely was it's a story about being a writer, a story about the life of a writer and what happens. And normally, I told Jalen this too, normally I hate stories like that. I hate when the protagonist is a writer. I always feel like, oh no, ooh. But like this, it just worked. And I don't know why it was, I don't know what magic you own, but I need a little bit of it sent our way because you did fantastic with it. So
Thank you.
So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that is our show today. Sam, why don't you let people know how to find you and where to look for anything else that you have coming out or when you're coming out with something else?
I'm on TikTok as SL Zeidan. As far as any of my books being released, I'm still, like I said, in the querying trenches for the first one, so I can't really do anything with that one. And the second one, like I said, it's in beta's readers' hands now. So
Fantastic.
But
Fantastic.
everyone, be on a lookout because this is a book that you will need to read because it will change your life.
Absolutely. So for the listeners, if this episode struck a chord with you in any way, and you felt that you learned something or would like your story to have, sit down with us and talk about your story, please just enter your information in the show notes link for our form. Or you can always check us out at www.obaconnect.com, where you can find a place where you can put submit stuff. So again, thank you, Sam, for joining us. Thank you for sharing this wonderful story with you. We're going to be so excited to see everything that happens with it. And I guess we're out of here, guys.
thank you.
Yes.
Of course.